Hi, I'm Alec from EasierHabits.com and I coach work from home dads on how to design and build their ideal life, one they're proud to share with and model for their kids. I have a confession to make. I don't just coach work from home dads, I have coached men and women, married, single, with kids, without kids. I focus on work from home dads because that's what I am. I have two young kids and raising them is one of the most challenging and meaningful and growth-filled experiences of my life. I also think that our society can benefit a lot from building up positive role models and fathers in our society. There are a lot of kids who are growing up in households without fathers, and there have been studies done on the negative impact of that, kids growing up in poverty, the emotional issues, and a number of things that come out of those emotional issues from not having a positive father figure in your life. So this week I was in a men's group and one person had commented on a recent panel of dads they had heard at some kind of conference or mastermind group talking about how they could be more sensitive to emotions. And their comment was, is it just me? Or is this not a topic I would expect from dads? Maybe a topic from moms or some mixed panel of parents, but not really like a dad panel topic. I thought it was really interesting. The responses ranged from, yeah, that seems kind of odd from a dad perspective. And on the flip side, this is straight out of the 1950s. This is so sexist. And I thought it was interesting because it raises an underlying question whether or not you think dads should or could or ought to be talking about being sensitive to emotions. Is there a difference between the parenting style of dads in general versus the parenting style of moms? And I would have to come down on the idea of yes, that there are unique things dads have to offer. There are plenty of studies about the different roles men and women play in parenting. And of course, every population is a bell curve. That means at the extremes, you have a few people, and then as you get to an average, you have a big lump of people. And then as you get to the other extreme, you have fewer people again. And men and women as populations don't line up at the exact same bell curve on all attributes. There are times when the averages are different. Now, this doesn't mean there aren't women who will do something, do a male trait more than men. It just means the averages are in different places. So more men will tend to one side of this trait, and more women will tend to another side of this trait, for good and for bad. And this is true of my own experience, certainly that there are different and unique things that I bring to parenting than my wife. And one area where I've noticed this is in the area of freakouts. There are two kinds of freakouts I generally see in my kids. One is a sense of fear or sadness freakout, where a child needs safety and comfort. And my wife and I both definitely try and provide this. I'm a lighter sleeper than my wife, so if my kids have nightmares, I tend to be the first one up for that and trying to help them get back to sleep by holding them, by talking them through their fears, by singing to them. And, I do my best. However, especially with one kid who feels sadness a little bit more intensely than the other, I find I just don't cut it a lot of times, and he will only be comforted by mom. And some of this is personal preference, but I think some of it is probably a slight difference in parenting styles, that I am probably quicker to change topics, to try and snap him out of his mood, to challenge him to try something different, or I'm trying to problem solve with him. Whereas my wife is a little bit more likely just to sit with that emotion and let the child feel it. I can and do try to emulate those things, but it doesn't mean I am on the whole as skilled as my wife at doing them. On the other hand, there's a second type of freakout that has more to do with anger and frustration. And I have one kid who especially gets hyper-focused on something when he's angry and will get so angry to the point of hyperventilating. And I didn't quite do the hyperventilating thing as a kid, but I was definitely hyper-focused on things that I thought were unfair that adults were doing. That was my trigger. If there was something that I thought adults were doing that wasn't fair, or they weren't listening to me when I was trying to enforce the rules with other kids, then I would start screaming, and I would get to a point where I would not listen, I would not stop yelling, and I would be completely out of control. And I have one kid who takes after me in this. And I have found that it doesn't mean my wife can never calm him down, but when he gets really frustrated, when there's a really big tantrum, that I am usually the one who can calm him down. My wife hits a wall, whereas I can usually figure out a way within 10 minutes or so to start calming him down. Sometimes the process takes a little longer than that, but I can usually see progress fairly quickly. So noticing a difference in how we handle freakouts, I talked with my wife about her experience with anger as a girl, and she said she definitely felt angry. She felt that in the context of her house, where she would lose her temper with siblings that were teasing her, and she learned that you just had to suppress those feelings. My experiences were very different. I would be hyper-focused like my son, and it wasn't just in the house. Usually once a year at school, I would get so frustrated by something that I perceived as unfair that a grown-up was doing, that I would be completely insensible, and I would be sent to the principal's office screaming, and eventually usually my mom would have to be called and come there to calm me down. And it took me quite a number of years to figure out how to get a lid on that anger. I had to learn physiologically things I could do, awareness of my body. I could catch the flush in my cheeks when I was getting really angry, or the pulse of my blood, and realize I'm getting angry. I need to stop this now before I get too focused on it. Eventually learning a lot of mindfulness and breathing techniques, also learning how to make a mindset shift so that the things I was hyper focused on no longer challenged me as much. I didn't expect everyone to be fair all the time, and I knew how to work with it when people act either how I did not expect or how I wouldn't believe is fair or right. I could handle those setbacks without freaking out. And those particular skills are skills that I bring to my kids, sometimes without thinking about it. There's another thing that I've noticed as a difference between me and my wife. It's not just our skill set and the different skill sets we apply to kids who are freaking out. It's our attitude towards kids who are throwing a tantrum due to frustration. Because the way they behave is so alien to my wife, it's just not part of her personal experience, it feels overwhelming to her. Whereas I am able to come into a freak out from a very different mindset of been there, done that, outgrown it, we'll get over this eventually. Probably not with this tantrum. There will probably be more tantrums, but we can handle this tantrum and we'll keep handling them, and eventually our kid will learn. And that perspective from my lived experience does change how I'm able to interact calmly with my kids during a freak out, and the ideas, the kind of creativity I am able to employ in dealing with this freak out, rather than feeling just a super high level of stress and overwhelm when kids are screaming their heads off. And the interesting thing about this difference to me, potentially, and this is a hypothesis, but men and women both feel anger. Both my wife and I had to deal with and overcome anger issues as kids, but because I had testosterone in my system, it seems like probably my anger was more intense and more often, and so I had a lot more practice with how to manage anger. I had to actually use techniques rather than just thinking I have to suppress it. I don't even know how that would work. And so because we had very different biochemistries, I think we had a different experience of anger and learned different skill sets. And so when it comes to parenting, we can apply those different skill sets and perspectives to our kids in different ways. Like I said, there are freakouts that my wife is much better equipped to handle, and there are freakouts that I seem better equipped to handle. But knowing that I was going to write this blog, I had this on my mind that maybe there is something in my past experience with frustration and anger management that could help my kids. And having that on my mind changed how I interacted with my son, who has the fiery temper, when he came home this week early from the park after a blow up. So I'm at home, my wife is taking the kids out to the park, and she brings them back. I can see as one of them comes in the door, he is very sullen. There is something off. And so I talk to him and ask him, hey, what's up? And he said, Mom threatened to leave the park without me. And I thought about all of these things, my experiences with this kid previously and my experience with anger management growing up, and I knew immediately, yeah, he's sad now, but they left the park because there was a tantrum at some point. But he didn't tell me about a tantrum. That's okay. I thought, what was most frightening and threatening to me as a kid? Well, it's not knowing why adults did what they did. And he was very hyper focused right now on why mom had threatened to leave him at the park. And so I told him, hey, I understand where you're coming from. I would find that scary too. I bet if we talked to mom, we could get more information and find out why she did what she did, and that would make it less scary. And that line of reasoning helped him sit down and listen to my wife, who said she told him several times why they were leaving the park and how she was never going to leave him at the park and never threatened to leave him at the park. He was just lagging behind, so she went to put the other kid in the car while this one was sitting down and moping and not getting in the car. It wasn't that she was going to leave. This experience for me was a validation, right? I reached into the unique past I'd had as a very angry child and was able to communicate something that my kid understood and able to get him up and to listen in a way that my wife wouldn't have been able to do because she just doesn't have the same experiences with tantrum and anger that I did. So if you're a mom or a dad watching this, maybe this week think about the experiences that have contributed to your unique skills. Where do your children respond more positively to you than to your spouse? And why is that? What are the skills you use or the life experiences you draw on to create that positive experience? And as you think about that, maybe do a journal entry. And as you think about that, I think you will find new opportunities to take advantage of those skills to help your kids and help your spouse out. If this video has been helpful for you, go ahead and like or subscribe to get the videos in your feed. Those will also help other parents find this content. Of course, if you know someone who especially has young kids who are tantruming and trying to figure out what to do about it, well, share this video and maybe it'll get some ideas. Until next week, make big changes, one small habit at a time.